1. War, Memory, and the Birth of Question. Hello. Today we are exploring how much money does Cambodia owe Vietnam? Together. You might be surprised because this story feels both familiar and strange. Before we begin, if you find this content interesting, please like and subscribe to the channel. Now, please dim your screen, find a comfortable position, and let's begin today's journey. You're not really stepping into a financial story. You're stepping into memory. You're sitting quietly, as if on a slow train moving backward through time. Outside the window, the colors begin to fade into brown, gray, and dust. You arrive in Cambodia in the late 1970s. The air feels heavy, almost as if it remembers everything. A historical fact stands here, undeniable. Between 1975 and 1979, under the Khmer Rouge regime, millions of Cambodians died due to famine, forced labor, and executions. You are walking through a silent village. There are no markets, no laughter, only the sound of wind moving through empty fields. People are not thinking about nations. They're thinking about rice, about survival, about whether tomorrow will come. Then, in 1978 to 1979, Vietnam intervenes militarily and helps overthrow the Khmer Rouge regime. This leads to the establishment of a new government in Cambodia. But what does that feel like from ground? You see soldiers, yes, but you also see villagers watching carefully. Some feel relief. Some feel uncertainty. Some feel both at the same time. A little-known detail. In certain border villages, Vietnamese soldiers were remembered not only as fighters, but also as people who helped restore order, fixing roads, sharing food, bringing a sense that chaos might finally slow down. But memory is not a single photograph. It is a moving film, and each person edits it differently. Scholars still debate this moment. Some describe it as a necessary intervention to end genocide. Others place it within the broader Cold War context and regional power struggles. And somewhere, quietly, ordinary people simply remember surviving. Now here is where the strange question begins to form. At no point in this moment do people say, yes, let's calculate a debt. Because survival does not come with receipts. Gentle joke number 1. If history had invoices, they would probably be stamped emotionally complicated. Please review later. Gentle joke number 2. Historians argue about dates, economists argue about numbers, and villagers just ask, is there enough rice? Gentle joke number 3. If war worked like a restaurant bill, no one would agree on who ordered the chaos. You're starting to see it. The idea that Cambodia owes Vietnam money does not come from this moment. It is something created later when memory tries to simplify itself. Because complexity is heavy and numbers feel light. But history is never light. Section 2. Reconstruction, Cooperation, and the Illusion of Debt. You're now moving forward in time. The sounds of war fade. In their place, you begin to hear quieter things. Conversations, negotiations, rebuilding. A key historical fact. By 1989, Vietnamese troops had withdrawn from Cambodia. And in 1991, the Paris Peace Agreements marked a turning point toward peace and reconstruction. You are now standing in the early 1990s. The United Nations arrives. The world begins to pay attention again. Roads are repaired. Institutions are rebuilt. Markets slowly reopen. Life carefully begins again. But here is where something subtle happens. As countries rebuild, they begin to cooperate. Vietnam and Cambodia develop trade, investment, and infrastructure connections. Goods cross borders. People cross borders. Ideas cross borders. And somewhere in modern conversation, a question appears. Who owes whom? A little-known perspective. In many cross-border areas, trade is so informal and continuous that people often do not distinguish between help, business, and daily life. It all blends together like river water. But from a distance, people like to label things. Aid becomes debt. Cooperation becomes obligation. History becomes a simplified story. Scholars debate this too. Some argue that post-conflict aid creates long-term dependency narratives. Others suggest that regional cooperation in Southeast Asia reflects mutual benefit rather than imbalance. Meanwhile, On the ground, something much simpler is happening. A farmer sells rice. A trader buys goods. A road connects two towns. No one is holding a calculator. Gentle joke number 1. If countries kept emotional debt records, meetings would begin with "about that thing" in 1979. Gentle joke number 2. Development projects are like group assignments. Everyone contributed, but no one agrees who did the most. Gentle joke number 3. If trade were friendship, Vietnam and Cambodia would be neighbors who keep borrowing sugar but forget whose container it was. You're beginning to understand. There is no single number, no official figure that answers the question, because modern economic relations are not built like personal loans. They are ongoing, shifting, negotiated. They are alive. And yet, the question remains popular. Why? Because humans like simple answers, even when reality refuses to provide them. You are now entering the quietest part of the journey. Not war, not economics, but memory itself. A key historical fact. Since the 1990s, Vietnam and Cambodia have normalized relations and deepened cooperation within ASEAN, expanding trade, diplomacy, and regional integration. On paper, things look stable, but memory does not live on paper. You're sitting in a classroom. A teacher points to a map. Students listen, but what they learn depends on where they are and who is telling the story. A little-known detail. In oral histories along the Vietnam-Cambodia border, many older residents describe the past not in terms of nations, but in terms of villages, rivers, and shared survival. Borders came later. Memory came first. Scholars call this asymmetric memory, the idea that two sides of the same history may remember it differently. And that difference matters, because narratives shape perception, and perception shapes questions. Like this one, who owes whom? Gentle joke number 1. If memory had a settings menu, every country would choose a slightly different version. Gentle joke number 2. Historians don't just study the past, they negotiate with it. Gentle joke number 3. If memory were a map, it would constantly redraw its own borders. You're now ready to answer the question. Cambodia does not owe Vietnam a clear, measurable amount of money. There's no official national debt in that sense. What exists instead is something less visible, but more powerful. Shared history, conflict, assistance, misunderstanding, cooperation, a relationship. And relationships cannot be reduced to numbers. You cannot measure survival in currency. You cannot calculate memory in interest rates. You can only understand it. Slowly, quietly, like this journey you just took.